Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Therapy Talks. It's Haley here. Before we get to the episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about an incredible gift from Switch Research. Click on the link in the description of this episode to gain free lifetime access to the Self Love Masterclass. You get access to introspective journaling prompts that accompany the daily lessons and over 20 hours of guided journaling sessions by a licensed therapist. Plus, you get a digital version of the Self Love Journal to use in conjunction with the video series. So don't forget to claim your free gifts today. On the episode today, we have Shae Ferguson joining us to talk about her work with couples. We give lots of valuable information about how couples can better connect with her focus on emotion therapy, as well as attachment theory and psychodynamic theory. And so maybe we can actually start with some discussions around like attachment styles. It sounds like that's a large portion of things that you discuss with clients.
Yeah, attachment theory, I think in general is kind of a foundation of the way that I work and how I see individuals and dynamics within couples. We all come from unique backgrounds, how we are raised and how we learn about ourselves through our primary attachment figures, and what that kind of tells us about the rules and beliefs that we will form about ourselves and the world and our relationships moving forward. A lot of the people that I work with, might come in for something like anxiety or panic disorder or relational issues, support after separation or divorce. And as we kind of do an intake that I learned about and have kind of like formulated my own approach to through my emotionally focused therapy training. We kind of do like an intake that's based around attachment assessment, and it's really amazing what we can kind of end up at from something that feels so present day every day. We're adults, it's 30, 40, 50 plus years down the road from when we were little, and we can in some ways end up talking about these times and moments where we were really little kids with our parents or our guardians. And I think it's kind of a shock to clients sometimes as well when they are able to piece things back that far and see how foundational that learning becomes in their life. So that's kind of an overall approach. I would say that just like how I view clients and what they bring into the session. And attachment styles are, varied based on your relationships. And so, you could have grown up with anxious attachment with your parents and then find yourself in a very secure relationship with your partner present day as an adult. And um, little things can arise where you can get reminded of what it was like to be bonded with someone that you were, anxious about and fearful about that bond, or what might happen and how that could threaten that bond. And um, so it's always really interesting work, relational work, relationship work. I just see us as very connective beings, and primary bonds and relationships being a big um, kind of thing that we focus our life around,
Mhm.
whether we realize that or not.
Right. And so when you're doing these sorts of assessments and when you meet a new client, like what type of questions are you asking so that you can get to those earlier experiences and get to understand someone's attachment styles?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the questions are about family, kind of general structure. Like I love to hear about um, who was in their home, if they, moved, what their home was like, if they had siblings, if there were other important people in their life that were, really involved and in and out of their home often, like grandparents, family, friends, parents, boyfriends, or, new spouses. If their parents separated, divorced, if, one of their parents passed away. So I like to kind of get a structural understanding and, what parents' jobs were, if they were, gone for 40 hours or more a week, or if they were in the home with the client often. And then I like to learn about their relationships with each of their family members or the people who are really close with them. So, I might ask questions like, inevitably when we are young, we come across confusing or scary situations, like fights with friends, or, something strange happened as you were walking home from school, something like that. If you were really bothered or hurt or sad about something, who was someone that you would go to, that you felt like you could, kind of go to for guidance or help or support? And um, sometimes, usually, that kind of opens up a conversation around, why that person? What do you think that person had to offer you? Did you feel like you could always trust and rely on that person? Why I, noticed you mentioned your mom. Why not your dad? Questions like that. Also, questions around just in general, like, how were emotions expressed? Who do you remember really expressing emotions? How did they do that? How did everyone else in the home respond? How do you remember responding? And maybe about a third of the time or so, I have folks say something like, well, I didn't really go to anyone. I didn't go to my mom. I didn't go to my dad. Maybe I sometimes went to friends, but mostly I like went to my room, or I just, kind of dealt with it. And they don't really understand how they handled these rough times of their life, even when they were very little, just kind of depending on themselves. And then I think all those questions just kind of open up a way for us to explore more, like what they think about that, and kind of growing their own like insight and awareness into what that means for them and their relationships with their primary figures and siblings and other people that were
Mhm.
important to them.
Really interesting. And so, from these questions and the responses that you get, do you find there's some themes?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a big theme would be, being able to go to a parent or a figure or a sibling that was, receptive, non-judgmental. I think I'm always kind of reflecting after sessions with people on how important it is to be just open to someone else and their story. I think, parenting is so complicated, right? I mean, parents are so busy and have so many demands, and sometimes don't have their own mental health or physical health addressed or able to address it. And so, parents are juggling a lot of things all of the time. And it's always so interesting to reflect back on how many of my clients say that they really felt judged by their parents. They really felt like they were, a problem. They were causing a problem if they were sad or really angry, that their parents, maybe didn't model safe or, comfortable ways to express their own anger, their own anxieties. So I think there's just a lot of theme around just feeling okay to feel things, to have a human experience of, reaction and expression on what you're experiencing, especially developmentally for children and teenagers. They're, not really able to always hold those things on their own. And I think it's so important for us to be able to lean on the adults or other important people around us, especially our guardians, our parental figures, to be like, hey, this scary thing happened, and this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and just have that be something that that adult can at least hear, at least have space for. That's a really big theme. And I think another theme would be that theme that I mentioned earlier, where some people kind of realize, like, wow, I didn't really go to anyone when something was bothering me, and then kind of how that relates into their adult life and how they handle stressors or sadness or grief today.
So, you're really highlighting that importance of, if you're feeling something, being able to label it, be able to communicate it in a safe relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think just navigating it, thoughts and feelings come, I mean, many thoughts and many feelings come from, I believe, every experience that we have. And I think it's a very human tendency to want to make sense of it, to understand it, to process it. How do I need to feel about this so I can move on to my next thing. And when big upsetting things happen in our lives, we can kind of get stuck, whether that's a pause, kind of like a block where we stuff that away and we don't revisit it. And when it comes up, we kind of do everything we can to keep that pushed down, or we never really get to make sense of it. So when it comes up, it's, dysregulating, it's upsetting, we might feel flustered, we might feel anxious, we might feel angry. Um, yeah, I think there's a whole lot of reactionary experience to everything that we see and do and feel, and um, so important to be able to have someone to bounce those things off of, or at least be able to have a relationship with yourself where you're able to, compassionately, understandingly open that up for yourself as well, if you really don't have someone else safe or comfortable or willing to listen.
And so it makes me curious around if there was like a absent parent or guardian in a child's life, what would you really notice in that client's experience or emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's a lot of developmental theories around this. I think it's just so dependent on the individual. I mean, I think that's why going back to their foundational primary experiences are so important, because everyone kind of has their own roadmap on how they handle that. Some people pour into friends, some people pour into themselves, some people numb or block or, use some other defensive type mechanism. But, mostly I would say the people who I work with who report, not really having parents available to them, whether they feel abandoned or neglected, or just, parents were busy. And, it's always amazing to me when I hear people say, something like, well, my mom was so great. She was just working all the time. She was gone all the time. She couldn't help it. But then they kind of skip over this whole, other very true and valid and real experience where, you're a child and you at some point had to come to terms with the fact that your mom was never going to be available, never going to be home, never going to be able to listen, and the impact of that. And so, yeah, there's just such a variety there in response to how people show up and what they do with it. And I think when we get to learn more is when we do get to slowly get comfortable with each other, get comfortable with going back, um, build some more awareness, kind of get some evidence where these little things are popping up where we're saying, oh yeah, back then I kind of did that, or this relates to something that happened then. And people begin to trust and realize that foundational experience really does sometimes, I believe, often connect to present day issues. Some people, I think, really don't understand that, or don't want to believe that, or come in with this idea like, well, I don't want to go back and talk about stuff that's already happened. I want to focus on now and forward. And it's always really interesting when we start doing that work. I always say, okay, yeah, let's do what you want to do, and we end up going back anyways. And usually, I'll end up highlighting that at some point, like, isn't that interesting? This wasn't something really thought that you wanted to do, or thought that we needed to do, and we ended up back here. What are your thoughts? Where should we go with that? And
Mhm. Yeah, often clients are so focused on their current experience because that's what's distressing currently. And so they really are noticing, they're like, oh, I'm feeling really insecure in my relationship, or I'm feeling this anxiety in my relationship. And I'm kind of alluding more to a romantic relationship, but then they don't realize that a lot of that is coming from their earlier years.
yeah, I mean, I would say with people that I work with, it can very much be that way, and it can very much be the opposite. And that might be how I market my practice, or how I work with some people, and then if they refer, friends or other people to me, how I kind of set up my practice. But a lot of my practice is focused on attachment, family, relational kind of aspects, and or trauma, things that typically are past experiences. And so I would say half of the people that I see very much are exactly what you said, focusing on their presenting struggles. That's what, kind of motivated them to come to therapy. And a good handful of other people will say, I've just got some stuff that I've been hanging on to for a long time, or I don't even really know what it is, but I know there's something there, and I'm finally ready, to start opening that up. And um, it's always interesting, everything is so diverse. I remember a therapist that I worked with when I was younger saying, when I, expressed interest in being a therapist myself, saying, you never know what's going to walk through that door. And I really relate to that, even with an individual who I've been seeing for a year, something new comes in, or some newfound insight comes to them, and we end up going on a completely different path than we had been focusing on, for months before. And it can be, yeah, so diverse.
Hmm. For sure. And so you say that you're really interweaving this attachment work and theory into your work with emotion focused therapy.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah. Oh,
what does that
sorry.
look? No, go ahead. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, emotionally focused work is attachment based. Sue Johnson is, kind of the primary person who I've studied under, and she has a million books that are, really great reads. And she, kind of explains that emotionally focused therapy is founded in attachment, and the understanding of attachment. And so a lot of the training that I've done has focused specifically on couples. And yeah, I mean, there's huge underlying connections there. I mean, even the steps of EFT work, there's like these 9 steps that you kind of hope to eventually like work your way through with clients. And if you're a very, EFT focused centered therapist, you'd have like pretty specific like agenda and certain amount of appointments you'd see couples in. And I kind of like I feel like there's a lot of benefit to slowing that down and allowing that to look like a lot of different things. So I wouldn't say I'm like the strictest like certified EFT therapist, but I also like want to continue training and learning so much more about it. But a lot of those steps involve building an awareness and understanding around your attachment needs, your attachment wounds, the deep emotions that revolve around those experiences and beliefs, and how that relates to your relationship now. I wouldn't say it's untypical for someone to have, an anxious attachment growing up with a primary figure in their life, and then feeling and experiencing similar things coming up in their relationship as an adult. And so making those connections and building that understanding is super important, I think, in that process, especially building understanding and awareness for your partner. I think that in part is why a lot of people end up in couples therapy, is they're just having a really hard time understanding each other. They might be able to talk to each other, they might be able to listen and really hear what's going on, but it's really hard to connect to those like deep foundational kind of root drives, or I think in EFT, emotions, that kind of influence or inform that person and how they show up in the relationship. So those two things I think are just kind of like heavily layered, and complement each other very well, and kind of, EFT being very based in that. And another form of therapy that I've done some training in is psychodynamic theory. And I think that also really complements EFT work and attachment work. Kind of those like underlying, again, like those drives, those blocks, and that unconscious bit. I mean, I think there's a lot to individual and couples work that revolves around, not actually consciously being aware of what's happening for you, or why you feel the way that you do. And so I think, I think building awareness is a big part, and I think connecting to and understanding, why you have the beliefs that you do now, especially if we can, collect that through attachment information, becomes pretty helpful.
Mhm. So if I was a fly on the wall and you're working with a couple and you're using emotion focus and your attachment work and also the psychodynamic, what kind of discussions would come up?
Yeah, I would say a lot of couple sessions for me looks like doing something called like the within and between and the tango. They're like different kind of exercises, or I guess like interventions, that I've learned through my EFT externship. And really what that means is, we kind of start with, what's kind of the presenting issue, what's the initial thing that occurred, and what was your understanding of it, what was your perception, your belief, and then we kind of go through this, when I write it down, I almost do like a circle, a cycle kind of drawing and diagram. And when I'm making my notes, it'll be, what was the initial thing that occurred, what did you believe about it, what did you perceive, what was happening for you in that moment, what did you feel, and that would be the secondary emotion. And so I think the work of EFT is really helping people get to those like deeper, foundational kind of rooted emotions. But initially we might feel something like anger, and so we'll say this happened and I was so angry, or I was so frustrated, something like that. And then like, what did that make you want to do, what did that make you think, kind of, the like metaphor, that I think the picture for the within and between exercises, like the infinity sign. So you kind of like go around this circle with this person of what's happening for them, what they believe and understand, what they're feeling, thinking, what it makes them want to do. And then you do the same thing with their partner, that same exact experience, where did you start out, and, so on. And I think what that helps with is their understanding of what's happening for themselves, connecting with their emotion. I think that really helps them understand what they really needed in that moment, what was really going on for them and what they were missing. But I think it also gives them the opportunity to really learn what their partner needed as well. And then the tango is kind of the step back, the larger thing that you do once you've done a little bit of that work with couples, where you can, kind of highlight like, this is the dynamic, like this is the pattern that's happening. Because usually, no matter what the kind of concern is, it could be finances, or, like a silly spat about, a birthday or something. There's like this pattern that each of them have, and what they have together. Really, I think that's what's most important, is what happens between the two that occurs. And so it's kind of really like highlighting that this is what's happening, this is the problem, kind of acknowledging like each other, their deep emotions, highlighting the work that they were able to do, being able to go through that with each other, connect with their partner, praising them for being interested and supportive of their partner's experience, and how they were able to do that within themselves too. And so I think that's a lot of what my couples work looks like. But again, you never know what's going to come in. We might be really able to do some pattern work for a while, and then a big disruption might happen where we kind of have to de-escalate, kind of go back some steps, or shift focus if big things happen. And couples work is also varied, also diverse, and so it can look like a lot of things.
Could you just reiterate that exercise? Because that was quite interesting, the way that you're kind of expressing that. And I think a lot of people could even take time to ponder that in their own relationship and utilize it.
Yeah, the within and between, or the tango. So it's kind of, I think, gosh, I'm trying to think of his name. There's a screenshot that I took from my training, and it has his name on it, but he drew a diagram, and it's the infinity symbol, and it kind of starts with like initial perception. So, like the incident that happened, what you intook from that, what was your intake?
So maybe a conflict of some sort. So it could be like a household chore, or maybe it could be infidelity, maybe it could be a financial squabble. It could be
something
whatever
happened. Your partner was driving down the road, and someone cut them off, and they yelled something or swerved, and cursed out the person. And what did you intake in that moment? What did you perceive was happening for your partner, happening between the two of you? What was your emotion? What were you feeling? That would be that kind of initial, what we call like the secondary emotion. It's not the kind of the big deep emotion, but it's that first thing that we feel comfortable showing, or that that's kind of our go-to, the first thing that kind of pops up. And thoughts around that, what you want to do with it, your action tendency, your behavior, how you act on it. And then I think hoping to kind of continue that with them until they can get to like a deeper emotion. Sometimes if I'm able to, kind of do some work around the need there, what they, feel like they really needed there. And then you can kind of, if you have time, in my sessions, I usually don't. But the hope is that you could swing over to the other partner and kind of revisit that exercise with them too. And I think the hope there is just to connect them with their like deeper primary emotion, but also to walk them through the pattern and how, it is for each of them on their end.
Right. So a partner does something, the other partner then reacts or has an initial response to that. And so part of you is going, what was your initial response? But then what is the deeper emotional experience or thoughts or beliefs that are happening at play that kind of
Mhm.
feed into maybe an uncomfortable or negative response to that partner?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love that word reaction because I think that's what's so great about EFT work is it is emotionally focused, but we're also looking at behavior. We're also looking at perception, belief. We're looking at the different layers of emotion. So a lot of stuff is happening in conflict for us, or I mean, even not necessarily in conflict with our partner, but um, we have a lot of things that we're reacting to, that we're responding to, and how does that show up for us, and how might that contribute to this overall pattern between us that isn't helpful or is based in protection or old habit formed from a long time ago, and that might be based in attachment and an early relationship.
Hmm. And so it's like when you're saying the before within the tango, it's like all of that kind of going on, but then also for those partners to look really far back in the way that they learned about relationships and learned about the relationships with themselves, learned about emotions, all of that comes together to soothe some of the conflicts that are maybe happening in relationships, or even just deepen the understanding of one another.
Yeah, I think that work, that kind of cyclical individual work, when you split them off, is meant to be this exercise to reach that more deep emotion and that need, and then kind of through that need, as you work down the steps, you can get more into attachment and understand a little bit more where that need might come from, for you within relationship as a greater experience, but also specifically with your partner and the dynamic that you two have and the attachment that you have to that partner, how you show up, how they show up, and how that dynamic plays out.
Hmm. And how would you support couples if one partner has an insecure attachment and the other is feeling pretty secure?
Yeah, well, I think imbalance is really common. I think there's a lot to say about what makes someone insecure or secure. But overall, I think I'm just like genuinely interested in what that person's experience is. But I think I would say rarely do I have a couple coming in where one person is saying, absolutely nothing is wrong. I'm so secure with this person and I'm feeling, really no issue, but they're, really having an issue and bringing me here. I think there's always an understanding that there's something going on for each of them, but that is probably probable where one person feels secure and another person doesn't. And I think a really common experience that I've noticed between couples is there's kind of this like pursuer distancer, and I know there's arguments around the language of that, and how like that might be unfair terminology, but I can't remember right now what the nicer way to say that might be. But I think there is someone who is, always trying to start the conversation or trying to bring up the issue, or feeling something come up within them more often than another partner. I think that's not an uncommon. I think that's a very common experience, and so usually I think in couples work, there's kind of a primary person that has the problem, or is the person that you would want to start with, the person who you would really want to get into with. And sometimes that person presents very dysregulated. And so, of course, your work would be to kind of target that and help them de-escalate, help them regulate, get more comfortable in session and with showing up with their partner in this way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just genuine interest and support for each person, and then yeah, kind of digging into that work. In the beginning, it's slower for me. I think I take it slow. I build relationship. I think um, I also just work heavily relationally, so it's very important for me to feel that, that binding between me and each person, each member of the couple, and make sure they're feeling really comfortable too. And so, yeah, someone might show up and feel okay and not feel like they have much to say, while the other person has, more awareness of something that's going on for them. But I think in general, that's just in balance of, again, that understanding of that person's needs or that person's deep emotional experience. And so the work becomes the same, just kind of getting them to a point where they can, kind of bridge their understanding with each other on what's really happening for them
Mhm.
individually.
And I think that I think many people might feel validated and heard when you give that example of someone might be the pursuer and one might be the distancer, right? Like a lot of times there is that partner that's really much like wanting to talk about things. And I will raise my hand when that person comes with my personality in the job, I think, because I want to process everything. I want to talk about it all. My partner's just sitting there chill, like just like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what are you thinking about? And like when he says nothing, he probably truly means it. But I'm just like, I'm always a thinking and talking and motion based, right? And so you're saying like the way through that is just a lot of compassion, understanding, maybe one person learning how to process a little bit more independently and the other person maybe wanting to process a bit more collaboratively and finding that balance between the two.
Yeah, I think initially that's exactly what's happening is validating what really is going on for each of them, how they present in those moments, what they think and feel and how they react and respond. But I think always the idea for me, at least my drive, my focus and session is to get to those deeper places with people, really, really help them understand what's happening for them. So if your partner is saying, hey, I have this problem, or I'm noticing this thing, or I'm feeling, really worked up in these situations, or really hurt or abandoned, or XYZ, and you're saying, oh, well, I'm fine, I don't see a problem, there is maybe an issue with that. Like, let's get curious about that. What's going on for you? And I think in the distancer side of things, that might be folks who show up a little more avoidant, a little more self-reliant, a little more introspective, like not really someone who needs to like verbally process or outwardly share the way that they feel. Probably typically someone who didn't really have that model to them, that wasn't available to them, that wasn't something that was made comfortable or okay. Maybe there was repercussions for that, punishment for that, discouragement of that. Um, yeah, and so I think it's, again, just wanting to get more into that and understand that more. Why do we feel like we have a lot going on for us, or why do we feel like we don't have a lot going on for us, especially when we notice that there's an imbalance between our partnership.
Mhm. And so, with the avoidant attachment model or style for that person, like what would be some internal work or suggestions you would have for that person?
Yeah, well, I think in couples work, I mean, I really like to build relationship with an individual, but sometimes it's also really important for them to be an individual work too. If that becomes a larger issue or obstacle that we're not able to like budge much with in couples work. But I think, the exploration is kind of that same exercise that I mentioned before, like when your partner comes to you, or like if we, take it back, when something happened to you, what are you perceiving is happening? What's your belief? What's your feeling? What's your thought? What's that deeper emotion? What's that need? Just really getting into their experience. And sometimes I think this is where that kind of unconscious, like psychodynamic work can really come in, because I think some people who are more, distancing, or more like withdrawn or avoidant, really don't know, I mean, or don't have like an emotional conscious connection to why they're doing what they're doing, because the whole idea around that behavior of not going to someone else is like, I didn't have things opened up for me. That was maybe never a thing, or never a good thing for me. And so from a pretty early age, I learned this is not what you do. And so for them, it might just be, the rules of the world and relationship for them, and really having a hard time understanding why their partner, has this need to address stuff or share stuff or have, this emotional conversation often. Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to that avoidance style, and again, why that happens and how that can be so unique to someone. But I think that's where that unconscious work can really come into, um, how are we with understanding our consciousness around why that's occurring for us, and is there like some other defense mechanism there? Are we numbing? Are we dissociating? What else is happening if there's larger stuff? Then maybe individual work is a part of that work too.
And so that kind of goes into the psychodynamic piece, right? And that's a lot of like Freud's work around like our unconsciousness and really leaning into that, what we're not presently aware of. And so what type of questions and things would you do, or strategies or techniques would you help people to lean into that unconscious portion of themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that work is there is a whole world of like psychodynamic or psychoanalytic uh based therapy and therapists. I think a lot of that work is actually not inserting yourself a whole lot. I think a lot of that is like kind of when you can get to that point, like opening that stream of um, conversation with someone and kind of just kind of like helping them get into their story or their thoughts, and kind of just trying to encourage them to like keep going and keep opening that up. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of different ways that people who are a lot more trained in this theory than I am do that. But I think that's what's kind of unique about unconscious work, is like we can't just consciously be like, oh, there's this thing that's hidden from me, and I'm just gonna like magically understand it now. I think that work kind of comes over time as you're like opening things up and making connections. And um, I think maybe to answer your question a little better, it's maybe more reflection, or like curious reflection. Like I might have a lot more questions around like, oh, why do you think that is, and a lot of times the answer might be I don't know. But if you could dig a little bit more, if you would want to understand that, even like pretending you're someone outside, like your partner, for example, like looking at your situation and they're just so curious, like if we wanted to take that further, what would you have, like even just ideas? And I think this can come up in a lot of different ways of like free association, or just what are you even just like thinking or feeling right now in your system. And um but yeah, I don't know, I think unconscious work is very like complex, and I certainly am not heavily trained in that arena, but I'm sure there are a lot of different modalities and things that you can use in those situations to help people open up. I think a lot of the work that I do is just, again, kind of like based in foundational understanding that there is a large part of us that is unconscious. And through, I think, the process of learning to open up with ourselves and build self awareness, I think that's where we kind of slowly make those connections and findings. But some people who are in psychoanalysis, or, even just psychoanalytic or psychodynamic based work, I mean, are in therapy like multiple times a week for many, many years. I think it's kind of understood that it's a pretty slow thing.
And that's where jokingly the lie on the couch comes from.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Lean
You got to
back.
get comfy.
Lean back and tell us what you're thinking of without realizing that you're actually thinking of it, right? So yeah, but I find that those types of questions that you ask are things that I would even utilize with clients too. Like, what are you noticing right now? Or what's just kind of been on your mind lately? And until you actually like come at it head on and create some space for it, then you can start to understand like why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And I think in therapy, one of the most helpful things is those aha moments, or those moments of awareness and moments of connection between I'm feeling and thinking this, and this means that, and let's bring that all together. And that's what we're doing as therapists, is trying to be those guides and supports to get to those places, so that you as a client or you as anyone can have that informed decision of going, what do I want to do with that information? Where do I want to go or take this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, building that self awareness and that connection and understanding with yourself, I think, is the ultimate goal. Maybe no matter what therapy or presenting problem you have, is how do I gain more understanding about myself, I think a lot of people come into therapy and they're so focused on the why, versus like what is actually happening and where is it coming from and what does it look like and feel like and come out like and what do I do with it? And then I think the why comes maybe later in a lot of situations, but that I think, yeah, as you were saying, a lot of that just comes from that self-awareness.
And then from that self awareness, you can communicate about it. Ideally, if you have a relationship, you can bring it forth and it be received in a safe, supportive way. And maybe we can even talk about this idea that if a partner is bringing up some feelings and thoughts, what would be some tips and suggestions on how to verbally communicate that or body language wise to receive that in a helpful way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is where I love and kind of got into nonviolent communication. I think it's so common with couples to, we get into emotion, we get into those action tendencies, those behaviors, we get into our part of the pattern, and we can kind of really end up losing ourselves or losing touch with what we need in that moment pretty quickly sometimes. And so there's some really simple exercises that I like to use that are really uh, like heavily influenced through nonviolent communication. But I really like the exercise of slowing things down. Like I think if we can keep ourselves slow, we have a better chance of keeping ourselves regulated, even when what we're hearing is like really difficult to hear or we really don't understand it. And from that, we feel all of those emotions coming up and those urges to act on them. So I really love exercises like sharing, with your partner what you're feeling or what you're thinking, what's going on for you, and having so the exercise is like, this is what I'm hearing from you, like this is how you feel, this is what's going on for you, is that right? Like I love this follow-up, this like, is that correct, like am I hearing you, giving your partner this option, this time to be like, yep, that's it, and sometimes that happens like really quickly, like when you're reflecting what your partner's saying, they can be like yes or they can be like no and they want to interject. But I think it's really helpful to have that clarification point. And then once you've made connection with your partner's experience, what their message is to you, and it's clear that you understand it, then you can kind of give your response. Well, this is, how that makes me feel, or this is what's going on for me in that moment. And then your partner kind of does the same thing. This is what I'm hearing from you, or I understand you're feeling this. And we start out really structured with that like kind of silly language, and I know that can be really uncomfortable for people sometimes. And I usually really like to have them turn and look at each other and really have this conversation with themselves, have this practice. um, but I really encourage them to like find their own way. How do you two talk to each other, and try to give them like homework to practice this outside of session two, and bring their questions or experiences in for us to talk about as well. But I really like that, like, this is what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm feeling, or this is, what's happening for me. Your partner being able to like regurgitate that to you, make sure they've got it right, share theirs, and just like kind of keep that going. And I think if you can keep that structure, you can keep yourself regulated, you can keep yourself slowed down. And then, of course, another big piece of nonviolent communication is focusing on what's happening for you versus like, these like you statements, like you always do this or you make me feel this way. Really just focusing and highlighting on what's going on for you. I think that's so much easier for partners to connect with. They don't feel like they have to protect themselves or defend themselves, or interject with what they're thinking is happening or what they're thinking their partner is doing. So I think those are like two more specific structured ways that I encourage us to just kind of keep on the practice of staying regulated, slowing down, really hearing each other out. Really not pointing the finger, but just like really explaining what's going on for us. And I think that makes it so much easier for a partner to connect to and feel motivated to respond to and work with.
I think that's so important because, again, like you're saying, so often one partner will share how they're feeling and the other one just immediately wants to say how they're feeling. But it's just slowing it down, offering opportunity for each partner to feel heard, make sure that the actual emotion is being respected and understood. And I always when I do see some couples on occasion, I always say to them, you don't have to agree with the other person's feelings. You just have to offer acceptance of it, because acceptance is not agreeance. Those are different things. You can just accept that what they're feeling is what they're feeling, and that's them, and you can think differently and feel differently. But if you offer space for it, that's where you actually be able to come together and have that closeness, that intimacy, and have that amicable relationship.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I like to say something along the lines of, try to slow yourself down around, um, your interpretation of what they're saying. Try to just build an understanding of their story. This is your partner's story. This is what's going on for them. This is really their perspective, their experience, their emotions. Try not to like lean in with your own systems interpretations or messages or stories about this. Let's really try to begin the practice of just really connecting to what's going on with your partner. And we don't have to agree. Absolutely. Like I've had in session that come up before where it's like, I don't understand why you're feeling this way, or I don't understand why you're doing this. And yeah, what does that mean? What does that look like for you to just come to a point where we are really two different people, and we feel and experience things differently, and the way that translates or comes out of us is different as well. And we're not always going to be able to completely understand or agree with our partner, but I think what we can do is build like a compassionate, at least understanding, but the hope is, supportive, accepting space where, we can let our partners be who they are, feel what they feel, and kind of work within that, instead of feeling like, we need to protect or defend or fight against it or deny it or run away from it, whatever we feel like we need to do.
Exactly. I think that's so valuable. And I can just see really how that's so impactful for couples to be able to come together.
Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
best. That's the best part of this work, is just watching people slowly um, get closer, understand each other, and want to hear each other out, versus having that reactionary experience. I really love to talk about the difference between responding and reacting. I mean, of course, we have a lot internally that we're reacting on, but how do we respond to our partners with it? What does that look like? And super rewarding work. I know there's a lot of people who find couples work like more difficult, harder to track, harder to, maybe a little more intimidating or something. But there's something about that dynamic and watching two people work it out, and especially like the here and now, like what's going on with them, the pattern, like pretty quickly, but I mean it shows itself to you, and you get to address it right here and right now. And so I think you get to see the impact of that work, the impact of that change happen pretty quickly sometimes, which is super rewarding. Yeah, to see people come together. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you. A lot of therapists do find couples work very intimidating, but again, it can be so wonderful to see that positive change and two individuals coming together and being able to solve their conflict and be able to come closer. And so, with that, I do want to give permission to any couples listening that you don't need to attend couples therapy only in crisis. You're welcome to go and to learn how to be closer and connect more and build an even deeper, loving relationship. And it doesn't have to just start from a moment of crisis.
hmm yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Mhm. For sure. And so, Shae, has there been any information around your couples work or emotion focused therapy work that we've missed so far in our discussion today?
Gosh, I don't think so. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? I mean, I'm sure we could talk about it forever. I feel like I could talk about it forever, but yeah, I think we covered the big parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such an interesting discussion. I couldn't help but lean into it more and ask more questions around it. And so I want to thank you so much for all of your wow. That we'll go back. I want to thank you so much for all of your valuable information and expertise around emotion focused therapy, attachment therapy, psychodynamic, and your couples work. I think there's really a lot of great tidbits of information here for couples to really think about in terms of how they're showing up, their past histories, and how they're connecting in their relationships.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
so nice talking with you. I love this work. So
Yeah.
it's always, there's just never enough that you can know and learn about it. And these discussions just kind of help solidify where you're
Mhm.
at right now, and what more you want to do with people moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.